Two, one. Hey everyone, Ed here. Today I have Rachel from Headwaters Wellness, and we're going to be discussing how she evolved her expressive arts practice with my painting right behind her. But you know what? I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Rachel, let's kick it off with this. Could you just briefly introduce yourself and your background?
Sure. My name is Rachel Wells. I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor and a board certified music therapist and expressive arts therapist. So my background historically started in music, and I was working in hospital settings, and then I went back to school to be able to communicate and use language and other arts when was working with different people. And so right now I see basically middle schoolers all the way up to maybe people in their mid 50s, and do a little traditional talk therapy, some music therapy, some art therapy, a little bit of everything.
Really interesting. What have you seen to be some of the benefits of your practice, like kind of historically with?
Yeah, so I think people typically seek me out for a couple of different reasons. I think because sometimes talking is just really challenging. I think it feels pressured, or sometimes, honestly, depending on the age of the person or what I'm working on, memories can be stored through like visual memories or auditory memories. And so sometimes talking about them is really challenging. So sometimes people will seek me out because talking about those things is hard. And so they want to explore what's going on either through music or through art. And so from my perspective, I think that I have a lot more tools in my tool bag for working with people than some other therapists might have. And that's not to say that that what I do is better by any means, just that it's a different a way of working with people.
Yeah, so it's a different way to supplement it,
Yeah.
right? So what they're already doing. That's really interesting, and I think that's really beautiful. I think you talked a little bit about relationship with art in your practice, but even personally, I'm really curious. What has your relationship to art been up until we met?
Yeah. So, well, I guess the better question is maybe for you, when you say what my relationship with art is, are you talking about the process of art making or observing of art?
Well, I think I want to know the second part first, and I
Okay.
think because I think in your professional practice, I definitely want to know both, but I'm really interested in the observing art for sure.
Yeah. So I think I guess I'll start with music first because that's where I started from.
Yeah, of course.
So for me, other people's music was how I learned basically how to communicate as a child, and growing up, and the way in which I expressed my feelings was through other people's music
Right.
before I created my own.
Sure.
In terms of art, I is a little bit different experience. I didn't really have any real connection with art. I mean, I would see art that I'd be like, oh, that's pretty, or oh, that's nice. And there was nothing really deeper, unless it was the finished artwork of any of my clients, because I knew the background, I knew the story.
Right.
Whereas for me, it's harder to get meaning making from other people's art if I don't know what's going on. So prior to really meeting you, I'm like, it was something that was like nice to look at, that adds, a sense of, or it creates a feeling in a space. But beyond that, I would say I didn't really have too much of a relationship with art as an observer.
That's really interesting, and I think it's kind of funny that you say that too, because even just to kind of segue this into how we met, right? I really just kind of found your website because you were moving into the same building that my studio is. And I thought that what you were doing was very much on the lines with what I was trying to do, and really helping resilient people become a source of strength for others, and helping people build narratives in their homes or in whatever environment that's important to them. So I was really curious. It seemed like you were doing what I was doing, but kind of in a very different type of way. And so I think when I called you, what were your after we kind of spoke over the phone, what were your first impressions of coming in for that first studio visit, and seeing my work and actually speaking with me?
Yeah. So it was unlike what I was expecting. I honestly, I was trying to go in there with an open mind because I didn't know. I didn't know how it would work to have somebody else do, like, how do I explain this? Like, how do the process of the art to have the meaning be the resiliency part. Like, I was so used to having people do their own art as a form of resilience.
Yeah.
So I truly was like, I don't know how he's going to do this. Like, we're going to see here. And so I was a little bit skeptical going in and meeting you. But then the more that we talked and the more that I saw your art, I don't know, it just clicked. And then at that, and honestly, it's like that, those aha moments, almost like a paradigm shift of like, what have I been missing? Right? When you're looking at like, okay, I can no longer be an observer of art anymore from like a boundary. Like, now I feel like understanding it from your perspective really shifted of the way in which I can see myself, I can see other people in art as meaning making.
Huh. That's really cool. I think so kind of going a little bit further, we decided at that moment that we were going to take one of my pieces, I think the one that's right behind you, and put it in your space just to see how it would interact. What was your hypothesis kind of going into it? I'll kind of state mine first. I didn't know how it was going to impact people, because I knew that you really worked with people on the process of making the work, but having someone interact with either a finished work of art or even helping you build a narrative around it, I was totally just not sure what it would be, if it would just be ignored or not. What was your hypothesis?
To be totally honest, I wasn't sure that a lot of people were going to like it. Because when I create an aesthetic in my office, I generally try and keep it very, very neutral.
Yeah.
I don't want to necessarily evoke a lot of emotion for people because they're already having a lot of emotions coming in. I want it to be a container space. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of your work has a lot of emotion attached to it. So I was really nervous about, is this going to be something that's almost like a reflection of their emotion and it's going to be too much? Or what? So my initial reaction was like, okay, I don't know how people are going to respond to it, and I don't know that it's going to go well. But I was like, I will, try out this journey, and we're going to see what happens. And we've talked about this, and we're probably explain a little bit more. But I was very surprised at what I found.
That's really cool. So yeah, it's been, and I think we've kind of done a good job of not really talking too much to each other over that period of time.
Yeah.
How over the, like, maybe you can break it up into like the first couple of months versus the most recent couple of months. Tell me what's been going on.
Yeah. So I would say the reaction from most people is overwhelmingly positive. I would say that in the beginning, when you switched out the art, not a lot of people noticed, which I found kind of insane, to be totally honest, because the artwork that was behind me was like a kind of peaceful boat scene. It was more neutral, right? Yep. And this work is huge. Like it's a massive piece, and it holds a lot of emotion. It is very colorful in comparison to what was there. So I was really surprised at first when people weren't noticing. Yeah. And I intentionally did not want to bring I did not want to bring attention to it because I wanted it to come up organically, that I wanted people to notice it or engage with it on an organic, natural level. And if nobody said anything, then I was like, okay, I'm going to prompt people because I am very curious. But I noticed once there did start to become an awareness of this painting, it was always like this like gasp sound would come from people. Really cool. Yeah. And then there'd be a lot of questions about it. Well, how is it made? Well, what is it made from? When did it get here? Things like that. And they all seem to like really, really love it. And I will say that the most fascinating piece that I think is that the people who would come into my office that were really distraught, they're really deep in their grief or their depression or whatever they're here for, the folks that are really struggling were unaware of your painting. And I don't know if it's because when we're in those states, it's almost like everything kind of closes in. We get really singularly focused. So it could have just been that they are just in their own stuff and not really aware of everything else that's going around. Right. Or it was that they're really uncomfortable with what's happening in here, and this is creating uncomfortability, and we're not going to acknowledge that.
Wow, that's really different. That's really interesting. And I wonder, when they're starting to ask those questions to you, my thought always for these pieces was that like those kind of reactions have been pretty common, but what is the utility? Like, how do you use that reaction to kind of build your own, I wouldn't say like treatment, or not even wouldn't say agenda, but just how do you build a narrative around it? Like, do you use it to tie into other parts of your practice, or use it to help further a conversation, or tie into their life? Just kind of curious what you do with that.
I think it really depends on the person.
Yeah.
I think now that I sit across frequently from this painting every day, I've developed my own personal relationship with it. So as time has progressed, I am more intentional about what I say or I don't say with clients in here, because I don't want my relationship with the painting to influence their relationship.
Wow.
So I think it depends. That's a hard question to answer, because it really, truly depends on the person. I will say, when it comes from a resiliency standpoint, then we start talking a lot about metaphor, about, okay, how do you see this painting in terms of your resiliency, or just resiliency in general? And one of the things that I know that I had spoken to you about before was that the people who love the painting are the people who generally have gone through most of their healing, that they're kind of on their way out of therapy, that they've done the work. And I think it's because when we look at resiliency in general, the people who are more resilient generally are able to see the bigger picture. They're generally pretty optimistic. They have a really good sense of self.
Yeah.
And those people are generally already at that place. So for your art specifically, I think this is actually a very small space. You can't tell in this recording, but it's a pretty small space. So when you're up close to it, you see all the nooks and crannies. You see a lot of the detail. It's hard to see the bigger picture until you take a step back. I think the people who are on their way out of therapy have seen the big picture.
Yeah.
And the people who are struggling are kind of in the nooks and crannies. They can't see, what's about to play out in their life just yet. They can't see, the light parts along with the dark parts. That paradox.
And just for the viewer at home, I want to just kind of address kind of how I make these pieces, and how like really excited that what you said makes me sound, because during COVID I found myself really in a difficult place, really overwhelmed, and I wanted to try to find a way to basically take everything I knew about the world, put it on the ground, spread it out, and put it back together for myself. And I thought, as I was doing this, and as I was seeking out nature and the main landscape to do that, I wanted to see how I could take oil painting and use that same method. So what I started to do is, on temporary supports with plexiglass panels, I started making 8 to 10 different oil paintings of a singular place, and then I would sculpt them together into forms. So when you look at that painting behind her, Rachel, you'll see that each of those pieces of textures, that's really a painting. And that's kind of it really is my own way, my own gesture of how I was able to pull myself kind of together, and helping people like you, and also helping your own students kind of identify areas that or become resilient, or overcome certain levels of adversity in their life, and then mentor others and become a source of strength for others. That's really what it's about. And that's really cool. That's really cool, Rachel.
Yeah. What I love about it specifically too is, and I think it's using the main coastline as inspiration is a really perfect example of, I think when people look at therapy, they look at life, they see it as very linear. I think they see that life should be kind of always happy and contentment. When in reality, I mean, it's beautiful and it's sad. It is joyful and it is grief stricken. It is all of these things in one. And I think, I think that that's a great representation of your painting, of like, it isn't like traditionally speaking, like the pretty art that I was talking about in the very, very beginning of this interview. It invokes way more emotion because it is such a perfect representation of what life truly is.
So Rachel, what areas of your business and life have improved by having this painting in your office? I know you talked about it a little bit, but and you talked a lot about your professional, but on your personal life as well.
Yeah. So, I think for me, when I'm sitting across from the painting, and I look at it from my own personal relationship with it, um, I think it resonates with me specifically because I see myself as a very resilient person. Growing up, I grew up kind of in a low income household with domestic violence, and kind of moving away from the town which I grew up with, and you know, um, different health concerns that had arisen, things like that. And now currently, a separation from my husband. When I look at different moments in my life, I see myself in different parts of your painting.
Mm.
I bet in this, part of my life I was here. And this is why, it was such a struggle and it was a dark period. And but then look at how beautiful that whole section came out ultimately. I think for me, I can see myself in every nook and cranny of that. And so now there are definitely moments where I'll be walking out in life and I'll think, is this one of the folds of his painting?
Yeah.
Is this one of the folds of life that like feels so dark that I can't quite see out of it, but I just need to take a couple steps back. I need to pause. I need to take a breath and look at the bigger picture. So for me personally, I think it continues to allow me to process my own life and to see the bigger picture, to keep moving forward, that, this is just one time in my life, but the overall picture is so beautiful.
It's really beautiful. And I think, before having this painting in your life, what tools or what things did you have to be able to accomplish a similar result? Or was that not present before this painting was there?
I mean, I think that I've always been a resilient person. I think, to be where I am in life, I don't think I could have gotten here without that. So I think the tools that I have previously was, my own art making, my own music making, relying upon friends and family, my own sense of self. And, I feel like I'm a generally optimistic person. So when, things go sideways, I generally see like this as like um, uh, just a blip in the road, or that, that I've gone through much worse. So if I can have gone through that, then I surely can make it through this. So I see myself as this, optimistic, realist person. But I think the way in which I look at things now is almost from a different kind of lens. Like to me, I would be like, it was a more concrete, like okay, well, I went through this and now I can get through this next step or whatnot. And now I look at it as like, well, what part of the painting, what part of art is this? What part of, it's almost looking at it from a sense of beauty.
Yeah. That's really cool. And I think, you touched on something cool, is like what part of art, and it sounds like, I can't, I'd really be curious, it sounds like the first piece of art that you've had, and now it's kind of a collection. So do you foresee yourself building out from this into other things that identify as meaningful, or how do you feel? Do you think it's going to grow or change over time?
Yeah, because again, I almost see it as like a relationship.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm not ready to get anything new yet because it feels like cheating a little bit. But in the sense of like, I want it to have everything that I have in this space to have meaning.
Yes.
And so I want to be intentional about every new piece of art. So, from my perspective right now, I have a piece of art that I got from a local retail store that's like probably $30, right? It really, I mean, it's pretty, but it doesn't have any meaning.
Yeah.
And so it almost pains me to sit from this perspective, because I'm like, I know that this was just like printed out. It was just meant for, to fill space, but not to necessarily have meaning. Yeah. So I think moving forward, the intentionality of every space that is going to be designed in here and in my house kind of has to have meaning. I don't want to be in a place anymore where it's just to fill the space to make it look pretty.
That's really beautiful. And I think, the process of working with you has been really delightful because, you've been so open to us and so open to ideas and listening to what we're about. And I think you've done a really great job of, kind of sharing our story and what we're about to your clients. Moving forward, who do you think that my kind of work or the work that I'm doing would be a good fit for?
Mm, that's a great question. Well, I'm kind of biased now.
Anyway,
I
nobody
feel
else.
like everyone.
Yeah.
I don't know. Um, I think I can definitely see your art in more spaces like mine.
Yeah.
I would love to. I think the important piece is like it needs to be a space where there's more interaction, right? I think while I would love to see your art in like big museums. I feel like it it makes the most sense to me, like on a personal level, to have it be in a space where it's like, let's have a really in-depth conversation about this. Like,
Yeah.
let's like from a relationship building standpoint, a meaning making standpoint.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and, I would say like hospitals and things, but I think that people don't always take the time to slow down in those spaces.
Yeah.
But
That's really important. And that's important to me because I've always believed painting to be that painting should be used. And, great painting has a utility to it. And it's how you use and it's who it's used by really defines what it is. It's really the work that I do as an artist is only one side of the coin. And I think even having a discussion like this is where the real work exists, personally. And I really appreciate you feeling that way. You know, Kind of closing a little bit, what is your one piece of advice for people interested in incorporating artwork into their business and life that you could give?
yeah, I think biggest piece of advice I would give is um, to come into it with an open mind, to be able to stand in front of something and see how your body reacts. Because when we are absorbing information, our body reacts first and
Yeah.
then our brain processes. So I think it would be to just stand there and see how it moves your body, see how it then impacts your thoughts and then in turn your feelings.
Yeah.
Um, and then maybe from there, there's meaning making from it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's funny that you say that because when you first came to my studio, and this was just an observation, is you kind of let me decide which work would be best for your space. And I was like, you know what? It's huge and it would look even bigger in your space. And I think it would be really cool and impressive if we did it. And I'm really glad that we did it. But I'm curious, from that experience of like giving me total agency and freedom to kind of decide for you, do you think it would have been different another way if you had come into my space and decided?
Um, I honestly don't think so. I think that even if I had chosen the piece, I still would have found
Something.
the message. Do you know what I'm saying? I still would have built a relationship with that piece too. Um, but I also think, I think it gave you agency because it was your art, like your baby. And I feel like I just feel like I needed to trust you in that moment that like you were going to bring something to the space. And again, when we were discussing it felt a little bit like a research study. And so I was like, okay, well, let's see how people would interact. And I think depending on the piece, you already know this, that people are going to have different reactions depending on the piece that you bring.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of curious now, like what was it about this piece that you're like, what, this is the one?
Yeah.
Because we haven't talked about that actually.
I think for me, a big portion of it was the size. And
Okay.
I think a big portion, when you came to me, you discussed that you felt a need, especially in times of like great overwhelm, you went to nature.
Mhm.
And I think of the works that I had, this one had the greatest impact and also the greatest sense that of what you were describing. And I just like I really just felt that it would be a good fit for what you were trying to do. And I'm really glad that you gave us the chance to be able to just kind of see how it worked. and was really pleasantly surprised at the results. Not even just in the benefit that it's done to your studio, but also to you personally. I don't think I could have accounted for that, especially because this work is so new. I mean, honestly, you're one of the very few people who owns any works of mine, or really even seen it, to be honest with you. So that's a really cool thing. And I'm really, it's really special that we got to do this and that you agreed to do this with me. Thank you.
Oh, of
Um,
course.
so just closing up, where can people find more about you and your practice online?
Yep. So you can head over to headwaterswellness.com. It's a work in progress there. I also have somemusictherapy.com as well for my music therapy business. Otherwise, you can also find me on social media such as Facebook and Instagram.
Awesome. Yep. And you can find me at just type in on Google anywhere, 𝙋𝙖𝙞𝙣𝙩𝙞𝙣𝙜. M is in Mary, AJKOWSKI. And the way you pronounce it, the J is a little silent, just kind of hidden there. But yeah, so you can find me anywhere, just Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or my website. So Rachel, thank you again so much. It's been really awesome.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.